Thank you, delegates. So on Resolution 12, entitled Draft Referendum Bill, the resolution passes overwhelmingly by 535 votes to 10. Let's move on now to our next resolution, which is resolution number 13, entitled Rejections of Nationality and Borders Bill, to be proposed by Anne McLaughlin MP and seconded by Graham Campbell, BAME convener. Welcome to Anne and Graham.
Thank you, convener. Conference, I cannot begin to tell you how utterly scunnered I am with this Nationality and Borders Bill. Scunnered, depressed, verging on distressed, horrified. I honestly don't know where to start. In the time I have, I can't cover all of it, so I'm just going to do my best to focus on three of the worst aspects. First of all, this legislation will criminalise people for seeking asylum and also those who help them. If someone arrives by boat, for example, but also in other ways, or hasn't got prior permission, they'll be charged and could face up to 4 years in jail. I would encourage everybody to read up on the horrendous journeys people have to make and the terrifying risks they have to take simply to find a place of safety. We should be in awe of these people and forever grateful that most of us will never have to endure what they endure. But the UK wants to sling them in jail, and that is nothing short of wicked. The Home Secretary says there's no need. They can simply apply in advance and arrive via the so-called safe and legal routes. Well, where are those routes? Who can access them? Certainly not the thousands of Afghans we left behind, people that the UK government says are entitled to be here, including loved ones of my constituents. There still are no safe or legal routes. The idea that by the time this legislation is enacted, they'll have set these routes up across the world is nonsense. So they're going to criminalise people for seeking our protection. Next on the list of astonishing things about this bill is that it simply disregards the rule of law, simply disregards it. Conference, since I became the party's spokesperson at Westminster on justice and immigration, my eyes have been regularly popping out my head at the blatant and open disregard for international legislation, legislation that the UK freely entered into. Article 31 of the Refugee Convention prohibits penalising someone for the way in which they reach a country, or for that matter, arriving so-called illegally. Nowhere in there does it say that someone cannot transit through another country to get here. So never believe their lie that it does, and never let it go unchallenged. Finally, I want to say something about communal accommodation. Throughout the pandemic, we have argued against people moving into hotels, hostels, and the so-called mother and baby unit in Glasgow, and they said it was a temporary measure. We just knew it was part of an ideological shift, and we were right, because this bill makes it clear that they don't want people seeking asylum to live in our communities. You know, Conference, in my street in Denniston in the East End of Glasgow, there are students, there are MPs, well, there's one, and there are people seeking asylum. That's what a community is, a mix of people with different experiences and different things to offer. And I know Graham's going to share a story of how a fantastic Glasgow community came together with their neighbours seeking asylum. They want them away from us, away from the support systems. And I have read some horrific research about the impact these places have on people's mental health, which is why the Republic of Ireland got cross-party consensus that they will move away from that model. Conference, here's a couple of facts for you. They're saying they're doing it because we can't cope with the high level of people seeking asylum in the UK. That is just lies. We take in a tiny proportion of the world's displaced people. Do you know which countries take the most proportionately? Ethiopia, Kenya, Chad, Uganda. The poorest nations of the world are the most generous when it comes to giving refuge, and the richest don't even feature in the top 10. France does not do well. Still, they take in twice as many as the UK does. Another fact you might want to be aware of is that Australia discovered, after offshoring people for years, another vile inclusion in this bill, that it had zero impact on the number of people arriving by boat. They've tried it, didn't work. What's the UK's excuse now? Well, they don't have one, which tells me this is about nothing more than right-wing political ideology. They just won't admit it, because it might tarnish their reputation as the bastion of democracy, the civilisers of the world. Why, Conference? Is it all right for them to have let themselves into other people's countries, taken over, exploited their resources, and even to this day to have their fingerprints all over the reasons many people have to flee their countries, but somehow it's not okay for those people to flee to our shores? And pandering to right-wing media is no excuse. Their job is not to fall in line with that. It's to show leadership, as our government in Scotland has always done. Because when you show leadership, when you try to win over hearts and minds by telling the truth about this world, it works. That's why those seeking asylum feel more welcome in Scotland. Not that life is just dandy, of course it isn't, and we all have to do more, but at least Scotland recognises its international and moral obligations. Sadly, we also recognise that we're prevented by the UK government from living up to them. I despair for those having to live under this toxic environment, and I will always offer my solidarity, but I'll also work even harder to ensure that Scotland's vote is yes to independence, so that we at least can continue to treat vulnerable people with compassion and dignity. Thank you.
As a tenant activist in Sighthill from 2002 to 2011, I saw firsthand how refugees from many countries nearly all escaped through non-conventional channels. Springburn today is a multicultural community of which I'm proud to represent. After 20 years of receiving refugees, our communities come together in solidarity and helped integrate asylum seekers. It's the kind of solidarity that Glasgow people showed again in Kenmure Street when we stopped that detention in one of our proudest ever days. But we know that most people leave their countries without the permission of the repressive regimes they are escaping. But in the hostile UK environment asylum system, proving a well-founded fear of persecution involves an unreasonable burden of proof. Everyone who knows anything about repressive regimes, whether they're in Burma, Eritrea, or in the past in countries like apartheid South Africa, knows that when you're escaping for your life, it literally means that you're escaping for your life. No regime is going to say, here's the proof that we're oppressing. Oh, here's your exit meeting. There you go, pal. Escaping for your life means that. God forbid if any of us ever had to escape Scotland. We know if this evil bill was in place, most of the refugees you've ever known, and I've ever known, would be criminalised. Even more pernicious, desperate people in boats in the English Channel are coming not because the system is too soft, but because it is too closed. Almost no one can arrive here legally now. But what if you followed the advice of Theresa May or the architect of hostile environment to come through the right channels? Some Somalis and Congolese I know have spent their entire lives, many decades, like the Palestinians, literally decades in UN camps, no chance of refuge in the country they seek, without the right of citizenship in the countries that they're residing in. We know from the way that, the intention around accommodation, this bill obviously designs the idea of, accommodation centres, basically prisons for people who have no offence. They're only escaping for their lives. No evictions, Empower Women for Change Unity Centre, and more. These are groups that spent a lot of the time in the hotel emergency last year and in the mother and baby unit, campaigning for the rights of people in there. But the dehumanising conditions in which people caught COVID didn't have toilet products to clean their rooms, while Mia's claimed money from the Home Office for those cleaning. These were dehumanising conditions which isolate people from the wider support of the community. That's what they're designed to do, to stop you getting support and solidarity from the wider community. This bill goes further, though. It criminalises you for showing that solidarity. Even if you're the RNLI trying to rescue people at sea, you are now criminalised under these new proposals. Our party, of course, opposes this bill. We would always oppose racist, imperialist, and colonialist mentalities that lie behind this sort of immigration bill. Scotland, as an independent nation, wants a system that welcomes refugees and migrants and that does not contribute to the foreign wars in the first place that cause these migration flows. I urge you to support these motions because we have to show our stand against this racism.
Thank you, Kirsten, and to everyone at conference, and hello again. I would like to thank Castle Douglas and Glenkins Branch for bringing this motion to conference. It comes as no surprise to everyone that I am speaking in favor of this motion, because on day one, when, and I mean when, not if, we get independence, we unfortunately will be inheriting a broken and cruel immigration system. But I want to speak to highlight just point number 6 in this motion, because I feel we may need some further discussion in order to ensure that we do not repeat those same cruel incidents as we saw by the UK government. And if you're wondering what are those cruel incidents, they are very helpfully highlighted in motion 13 by the fabulous MP for Glasgow North East, Anne McLaughlin, and Councillor Graham Campbell. The reason why I want to point your attention over to number 6 is that whilst it highlights how Scotland is a welcoming country, we still need to listen to those who went through the harsh and cruel procedures of the Home Office. Because honestly, if we don't give them a safe space to talk about their experience, then we go down the same mistake as what UK government did. In addition to this, and I am actually kind of not very happy to see that my amendment was not included in it, I also hope that we also include important NGOs such as the Scottish Refugee Council, Rainbow Migration, and many more, as they are in regular contact with those who need help. Now, I understand people will be asking, why now? Why do we need to talk about this? Why not discuss it after? Well, conference, you just need to take a look at the poor handling of Afghanistan, the Windrush scandal, the EU settlement scheme, and stories of LGBTQ plus refugees who were subjected to disgraceful procedures just to prove their gender and sexual identity. Now, conference, do we want to inherit this scheme from day one, knowing with this knowledge in mind? Or do we want a Scotland that is welcoming, inclusive, and willing to listen to the stories, which you actually can find in your affiliate groups? Conference, I ask of you to please support this motion. Thank you.
Let's go now to resolution number 17, conference. And that resolution is entitled Scottish Citizenship for New Scots. It will be proposed by Emma Harper, MSP, and seconded by Stuart MacDonald, MP. So welcome to both of them.
Here to move Resolution 17 on Scottish citizenship for new Scots after Scotland takes our place on the international stage as a normal independent nation with full control over our immigration. This resolution was submitted by Castle Douglas and Glen Kent's branch, who I am very familiar with in part of my South Scotland region. I would like to recognise the branch convener, Kim Dams, and all branch members for their work in creating the citizenship resolution so that it reached our final agenda. Unfortunately, Kim is unable to move this resolution today, and I'm happy to have been asked by the branch to do so. Conference, immigration is a subject which has shaped Scotland's past and is central to Scotland's future. Historically, people have left Scotland in higher numbers to take up work and lives elsewhere. This trend continued up until the final part of the 20th century, and Scotland's population steadily reduced. However, between 2004 and 2019, people from across the world, including from our European neighbours, chose to come here and make Scotland their home. And for the first time in Scotland's history, we enjoyed its highest population growth in more than a century. Our population has continued to increase since then, despite the huge disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic and Brexit has caused. Our new Scots include my husband, who was born in the USA and is choosing to wait until we have independence to apply for his Scottish citizenship. Our new Scots are absolutely welcome here and have contributed to Scotland immensely, not just through making our population younger, which is important for our long-term sustainability, but they have also contributed to our culture, our economy, and to life of our communities across the country. They are our colleagues, our neighbours, our friends, and our loved ones. We are honoured that they have chosen to make Scotland their home. And in the face of Tory austerity, hostility, and regressive and insular policies, we should fight to welcome new Scots here. We should stand up for their rights, and we must have an immigration system in an independent Scotland which has fairness, dignity, and respect at its heart. Conference, as the resolution states, the current hostile environment within the UK Home Office is continuing to create a culture of xenophobia and worry for all those who are having to deal with the department. Their policies have caused hardship and worry for many new Scots, fearing bureaucracy and sanctions and waits of up to 12 months for responses and decisions to be made on immigration applications. I have first-hand experience of this culture through my casework in the South Scotland region. One family waited 7 years for their immigration appeal to finally go through the immigration tribunal system, and I'm pleased that the family have now been offered indefinite leave to remain, but this just isn't good enough. Conference, Resolution 17 seeks to build on our previous immigration proposals and as such makes a number of recommendations for future policy. Unlike the current UK system, which can see children who weren't born in the UK but who have lived here for most of their formative years deported, I welcome the suggestion that children who come here and who have only ever known Scotland should have a straightforward route to citizenship. I also welcome the scrapping of the current completely outdated Life in the UK test. Many citizens who were born and bred in the UK would struggle to know the answers to many of the questions in the test. Our country will not be more cohesive because more people have heard about the Battle of Trafalgar, but rather our country will be more cohesive if future citizens understand better how to participate in Scottish daily life. And I agree that point 5 on exclusion and indeed inclusion criteria are also important. Examples of this criteria could include an applicant's ability to demonstrate knowledge of Scotland's fair and equal society, the human rights afforded to all living in Scotland, the fundamentals of Scottish parliamentary and local democratic systems, and of the independence of Scotland's justice system. I submitted this as an amendment, but I'm happy to support this resolution with or without my amendment. Eligibility criteria should also be based on the applicant's willingness to confirm their compliance with the laws of Scotland and the rights of those living in Scotland, and not on their ability to recite British history and statistics. Conference, there is much in this motion which can be discussed, but I hope we can all unite on the principles of ensuring that Scotland's future immigration policies are fair, humane, inclusive, and meet the needs of the people in Scotland. Conference, please support this resolution.
Conference, it's my pleasure to second this motion from Castle Douglas and Glen Ken's branch. And there can be few more fundamental questions for a country than who it recognises as its citizens. And while sometimes we may take it for granted, being a citizen is, of course, absolutely fundamental to our lives and our enjoyment of a whole host of rights. In a sense, it is the right to have rights. And as our Social Justice and Fairness Commission put it, citizenship can be a pivotal first step in providing security and a sense of identity. It is a recognition on both sides that this is your home country. So it's crucial that we get this right. And as the motion notes, we have a strong starting point with the expressly inclusive approach advocated for in the 2014 White Paper. But as the motion also states, we can build on that. And in doing so, we can create a regime that will reassure and indeed inspire people about how an independent Scotland will treat people, including not just those who would have citizenship automatically or through registration, but also those who come here and choose to apply for it. In seeking to build on the 2014 White Paper, the motion sets out a useful guide to some of the issues that need to be addressed and some important principles that should guide us. All sorts of options would be open to us, learning from international best practice. For example, we could consider automatically placing new Scots in a path to citizenship, while of course acknowledging that some would want to opt out for a variety of reasons. Other changes should be considered utterly essential, not just optional, and among them are the outrageous fees and charges that prevent people accessing citizenship, even where they have a right to that citizenship. Conference, nobody feels that injustice more keenly than the hundreds of thousands of children who were born here or arrived here at a very young age and for whom this country really is the only home they have known, but who are priced out of their citizenship. Without exception, the Home Office charges each child over £1,000, making a 170% profit on the cost of processing each and every application to register as a citizen. Many families simply cannot afford the fee, and children may be left without any status at all in the country they call home, subject to the full force of the awful, hostile environment. Other families face impossible choices, with enough money to register one child, but not a second or a third, which to choose. All of this runs utterly contrary to the best interests of the child and the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, though we know how little regard the Tory government has for that. Conference, scrapping such outrageous fees is a no-brainer and a powerful signal about the type of country and independent Scotland will be. There are other opportunities to enhance the inclusive framework that we want to put forward and that we will implement, So I urge you to support this motion.
Perpetually ruled by Tory governments at Whitehall.
Scotland hasn't voted Tory since the 1950s, so why should we put up and pay the price for their damaging policies?
We know a better country is possible. We're already building it together.
Street by street, town by town, we're turning the tide for independence.
We've come so far since devolution, but now is the time to finish that journey. The journey to a fairer, wealthier, greener Scotland.
A Scotland that leaves no one behind.
A Scotland that plays its full part in the world. An independent Scotland.
Scotland can choose a better future, and if we keep spreading our positive vision, that future is ours to win.
That choice is coming. Let's get ready and let's do this.
The word all is really important. It is about everyone in Scotland. It is about those born here and those who honour us by making this country their home. The Scottish election in May was the first time refugees and all foreign nationals with leave to remain had the right to vote. That was important for its own sake, but it is also a symbol of the country we are seeking to build. Open, welcoming, diverse. Refugees from Syria and elsewhere have settled in Alloa, on Bute, in Glasgow, in the Highlands, and many, many places in between. They are a part of who we are. They enrich our society in so many ways. We should take pride from the fact that people who came here to escape persecution and war could, often for the first time in their lives, exercise what should be a universal democratic right. You know, one of the lessons that humanity seems destined to have to relearn time and again is that the rights we enjoy today can never be taken for granted. That feels especially true right now. But sadly, for many people across the world, especially women and girls, these rights are still a distant aspiration. Not just the right to vote, but the right to go to school, to freedom of expression, to be treated equally. In recent weeks, we've all heard heartbreaking stories from Afghanistan, and we have witnessed scenes of extraordinary bravery. People risking all in desperate attempts to save their children. Women demonstrating in defence of the most basic rights in the face of a truly barbaric regime. We can only imagine the courage that takes. In Scotland, we are committed to welcoming and supporting those fleeing the Taliban. The UK has a heavy responsibility, particularly to those who supported British interests over the past 20 years and now face mortal peril. They must not be abandoned. There must be a credible plan to bring each and every one to safety and security. And we also have a continued moral and humanitarian obligation to provide hope and support to those who remain, particularly those striving to preserve the progress of the past 2 decades. The Afghan crisis has also shone a spotlight on the UK government's wider asylum policy. Now, I know that speaking out about this issue is not always popular, but offering asylum to those in dire need is an expression of our common humanity. The UK government's Nationality and Borders Bill fails that basic test of humanity. It could criminalise those seeking sanctuary from oppression simply for claiming asylum. The UN Refugee Agency says that the bill would violate the 1951 Refugee Convention. These proposals are a stain on this Westminster government. They run counter to the kind of country we are seeking to build. And I look forward to the day when our asylum and migration policy is decided here in Scotland, not by a government in Westminster that sees it as an opportunity to show how tough it is rather than how much it cares.